We are a podcast for product marketers and B2B SaaS who feel misunderstood of what they do.
From someone who truly gets what you do and
basically help you feel less like a misfit, being unignorable in your role.
We got another episode of We're Not Marketers. This is Zach on the line, the sales water lad. Before we kick it off and we roll out the red carpet for our next esteemed guest, I just got to pass the mic to our fellow co-host. Let's kick it off with Eric right here.
What's up, everybody? Season 4. You may remember my title is Franken Marketer of the group. Been promoted to Franken Manager now. And for the last guest, Gab, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Gab Bugeaud, sales deck intern, or, well, associate. I just do sales deck till I die. I'll pass it up back to Zach.
Speaking of promotions, our career promotions in the last 4 seasons fail in comparison to our next guest. In the last 10 years, he went from AE to CMO. You've seen him on LinkedIn sharing advice from copywriting, AI, how to grow your career. He's crossed from sales and he's now deep in the trenches of marketing. But a deep question we're gonna ask ourselves today, is he still a seller? Is he a marketer? Is he neither? We got the CMO of Copy.ai, Kyle Coleman, on the line. Kyle, what is cracking?
I am living the dream, gentlemen. Really excited for this conversation. Let's do it. Let's jump in.
Perfect. Kyle, like you said, you told us in the back room, you prepped the deal. So with that in mind, the first question that's going to come at you, Gab, take it away.
Thank you. I'm very excited about asking this one, especially with your career progression, as we know. But Kyle, are product marketers actually marketers? Why or why not?
Everybody is a marketer. Every single person inside your company is a marketer. And so the answer is yes by default. Now, to put a more serious answer on it, I think the answer is very squarely yes, product marketers are marketers, because marketing has to be a leadership function inside of the company. And it can't be a leadership function inside the company or externally if all you're doing is marketing features. To be a leadership function inside of the company, you have to do storytelling. You have to compel people to care about what you're saying and compel them to take action. And that is a lot of what product marketing is charged with doing. There is a big myth, especially in Silicon Valley, I found with many startups, that the best product always wins. And that just could not be further from the truth. More often than not, the best story wins. And the best stories often are architected by the best product marketers in the world. And I would even include somebody like Mark Benioff in that. He is a marketer first, and in many cases, a product marketer first before he's a CEO. And he's done such a masterful job of winning with the subpar product. Does anybody say that Salesforce CRM is the best CRM in the market? Hell no. But they've made it happen over and over again because they've built such an unbelievable marketing machine. And yes, I strongly believe that product marketers are marketers. I strongly believe that the role that they play is developing a leadership function inside and outside the company, and you can't win without them.
I'm pissed off that I didn't brought my going after Salesforce hoodie right now because I've been so much on point. But it's a very, very good narrative and very good logic behind it. You know, it's always the fact that the best product rarely wins. It's a big question of, again, story, but also distribution around it. So we're not too pissed that you're disagreeing with us.
We really like it too, because you said it. You squarely said it. You know what's going to make this really fun? It's us three, Kyle Coleman, and we'll see if we can pull you a little bit. We'll see if we can pull you a little bit over here too. But the context of this next question for you, Kyle, is that, like we said in the intro, you started in sales. So did you always have this POV when you first started? Did you just day one, you're like, yo guys, I'm a marketer? At what point did you come to that understanding? I'm curious to get more of that evolution of thought, or was that always just like your day one perspective when you first started your career?
Yeah, it's a great question, Zach. And I think there's something of a false dichotomy about this separation of sales and marketing, where if you really look at what every function does inside the company, outside the company, there's no clear line between sales and marketing. Everybody is doing everything. If you are, quote unquote, an account executive and quote unquote, all you do is sales, you're doing a lot of marketing. You're creating custom decks. You're creating the right story that maps to the strategic initiatives of the companies that you sell to. You're doing evangelism every day for the buying groups that you're selling to. There's a huge marketing component of selling. It's just normally at more of an atomic level, a one-to-one type level, as opposed to a one-to-many type level that a lot of marketing people do. And similarly, on the marketing side, you're doing a lot of sales. Sales is the most popular profession in the world because there's an element of salesmanship in everything that we do. And so I don't think I think I understand why people do it and they tease these rules apart because specialization is useful and all the rest. But there's an element of sales and marketing and sales. And so I've never really thought about it really pulling the two apart. And that may be because I actually have to correct Zach a little bit of the intro. I started as an SDR and I wasn't even an account executive in my first tech company. Now I was in a sales role prior to tech at ad agencies and things like that. But my first role inside of a tech company was as an SDR. And as a sales development rep, you sit squarely between sales and marketing and you see how the sausage gets made in both camps. And you develop a fluency of language in both of those vocations or both of those functions. And you start to see like they have way more in common than they have differences. And so that's been my mindset for the last 10 years, 12 years as I've risen the ranks and learned more about how effective go-to-market teams function. The left hand always has to know what the right hand is doing. Sales and marketing have to be, and I know it's really trite to say, but they have to be fully aligned. And if they're not, the company cannot succeed. So there's elements of both. I try and maintain that mindset that there has to be elements of both in my job. Every single thing I do is half sales and half marketing.
Otherwise, you're just creating more silos and less strategic alignment between all of the departments together.
That's exactly right. And I really went, and I'm sorry, Zach, I'm answering this question probably in a much longer way than you would hope I would, but I really tried to
we can let you cook. We're letting you cook. Get in that kitchen. Get back in the kitchen over there.
I'll make it like an NFL player. I really put my money where my mouth is. Earlier in this year, I started at Copy.ai in January of 24. And part of the reason that I joined the company was to help reposition it from a PLG freemium application to an enterprise grade platform with a tops down sales model. And so a lot of that, of course, was a messaging and positioning exercise. And we had to do a lot of category work and things like that. But another part of it was pricing and packaging and creating the sales assets and figuring out deck and demo. And so I could have, and I think a lot of CMOs would have, created the assets, done some enablement, handed it off to the sales team, and then went to bed and said, all right, my work here is done. I went a step further and took the sales calls, carried a quota, closed business, went through the full sales cycle to really learn. It's not just about the deck and demo. It's easy to have a good first call. It's much harder to have a good 10th call. And what are all the steps that we need to go in between so that we can support the sales cycle for the full cycle? And then, of course, that extends to the customer side as well. And so I think it's really important that marketers break down their preconceived notions about where their job starts and stops and get more involved in generating revenue. The closer you, marketers who are listening to this, or anybody listening to this, the closer you stay to revenue, the more job security you have. Stay close to revenue, make an impact, get interested. That's how you're ultimately going to win hearts and minds, get your ideas across the line, and grow as a person.
I've got one big question that I know people are asking right now, so I'm going to ask it on their behalf. How many of those deals did you close?
I am the number one sales rep at the company, my friend.
Whoa, let's go.
I had a 200K quota. I closed 350 in a quarter. It was all self-sourced, all outbound. I didn't take anything away from any of the other reps. All the inbound leads went to them. So that was...
They still had their buffet to eat off of. I love
That's right.
it.
Exactly. It was a good quarter.
Man, that's awesome. Well, hey, one, that's really cool because I've actually never thought of doing that. I think it's something I want to take with me, especially starting a new role. That would be so cool to come in. And like, shout out to you for like actually doing the work and getting to that level of hitting your quota, smashing it actually. So I think, yeah, anyone listening in, the one tip you should be taking away from this if you are, trying to get more involved with the business.
And I'll go like hitting the number was great, and showing the whole team, sales and marketing, the whole go-to-market team that was putting my money where my mouth was really validating for them. It was also nice for me, like dusting off some of the old sales tricks and tricks of the trade. That was fun. But I think what was really interesting, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, guys, is maybe 6 weeks before I started getting into the field, I was going through the enablement type stuff. Here's the new sales deck that we have, and here are the packaged use cases that we sell and all the rest. And one of the sales reps came to me and was like, these 2 slides, they're not like, I'm not going to present these slides. They're not good. They're not telling the story. And I was like, shut up. I made these slides, blood, sweat, and tears. You present them. Here's the talk track. And then I got in the field 6 weeks later, and I went through that deck, and I got to those 2 slides, and I saw the video on the video call. I saw the lack of reaction from the people in the room, and I was like, shit. Sales rep. We reconfigured the deck and made the changes, and that just reminded me that if you are marketing from your ivory tower and you're like, every word is precious and we're not changing a beat, like, and you're not feet on the street actually understanding how your messaging is resonating, you're not doing your job. That was a real wake up call to me. And there was a reminder that I had been out of the field for a little too long. Like, it's the biggest regret I have about my previous gig at Clary was that I wasn't in the deals day to day as much as I should have been to inform messaging, positioning, sales assets, collateral needs, customer stories, all the things that you need to actually generate revenue. You got to be in the field, or at the very least have a super tight feedback loop and take that feedback seriously from the sales team in order to improve.
Tell us more about that experience right there. Oh, Eric, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I don't want to kill you. I actually had a question as you were talking, and now I want to flip my question. The original question was, you mentioned that how important product marketers are, especially around storytelling. So why is it so hard for us to own that and create that hopefully awesome story that you're doing with, excuse me if I'm wrong here, but go-to-market AI?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Copy AI. No, copy AI.
Yeah.
No, like the category that he's working on. I think it's go-to-market AI.
Yeah.
And so
corrected.
That was my original question, but I'm flipping it now to more seeing an actual activity that you've done. Do you also feel like you got the buy-in for that because like you put your money where your mouth is? It wasn't just you sitting in your ivory tower. It was like, hey, this is what I think. Yeah. This is how we're going to test it, and here are our results.
I would say yes and no, Eric. I would say my means of getting internal buy-in for the category definition and the positioning came before me stepping into the field. So it was a little bit out of order, but it was a necessary thing I thought for me to do. And by the way, we did this whole category. I started on January 2nd of 24, and we did our category launch on March 13th of 24. So it was something like 185 days later or something like that. So anybody who tells you that these big projects need to take 12, 18, 24 months, obviously we're a small company, so we can move with a little more agility, but pressure test those assumptions about how long this stuff takes. So what I did to get internal buy-in was I interviewed every single person inside, literally every single person inside the company. 50 people wasn't like a hugely taxing thing, but I interviewed them and I asked them very basic questions, Eric. What is the main problem we solve? For whom do we solve that problem? And what is the impact of solving that problem? They seem like simple questions, right? They're not. They're very complex questions. And I interviewed not just the internal employees at Copy AI, but also our board members, a handful of our other investors, our customers that we were working with. I just had probably about 75 or 80 of these same exact conversations. And sometimes the conversations took 5 minutes and sometimes they took 45. It depended on how energized people were by the questions. But anyway, did 75 of these interviews, got 75 different answers. And so my job then was to go and coalesce, what are people saying? Sometimes the answers were very low level, feature function oriented. Sometimes the answers were super highly. The board and the investors are talking about a 5-year vision that they have and the problems that we solve with disintermediating the CRM. And I'm like, I'm never going to use the word disintermediate in my life. I just did. And so you got this huge range of answers from these people. And my job then was to synthesize and to pull the insights from the right people at the right level that defines a category. And the level that defines a category is a conversation that's going to be a C-suite board level conversation. If we try and create a category around the features and functions that we operate, it's not going to be nearly as compelling as the business impact that we solve. And so I was able to go through all of the insight that I had. And of course, I had my own perspective on these things, but going through a lot of the insights that I gathered, I was able basically to take the company along and say, here is what I'm doing. Here is how your insights are valuable. Here's how I'm thinking about things. And then when we arrived at an answer, people understood the journey to get there. So that was like, some people call it internal marketing, whatever you want to end up calling it. You have to do that kind of evangelism internally to bring people along. If you just surprise them with an answer and they don't feel like they had a part of that answer, it's much, much harder to get buy-in.
Great context. That was, I think, for a lot of us, super helpful on how you turn that operationally into a success. Sweet.
Zach, mind if I jump in before you ask your question?
Oh, get in there.
Awesome. Carl, you said something about your biggest regret at Clary was not being invested enough in the day-to-day of those deals, right?
Yeah.
If I'm a PMM and my target is centered towards becoming a CMO, if I'm focusing on those leads and being very close to revenue in that pipeline and those deals, what do you think like current PMMs or future CMOs should need, well, actually need to get out, sorry, actually need to let go of? What
Yeah.
element is fluff and won't help them progress in that role and really putting their money where their mouth is, but that they need to say no to something else?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't exactly know what a perfect answer is here, but I'll do my best to answer it. So I benefited from a proximity to demand generation as I rose the ranks. In my initial company at Looker, I was a sixth employee at Looker. So we were super small at the time, like friends and family were customers. Over 6 years, we got to 110 million, and I drove the outbound engine that was responsible for about 40% of that revenue. That was great. Okay, cool. But the really cool thing for me was that I worked hand in hand with our head of demand. Her name is Lisa Daniels. She now works at Copy.ai, another reunion. And so I learned from the best in the business, like what does good look like for demand generation and all of the other things that fall out underneath it, marketing operations and growth marketing, digital ads, event marketing, all the rest. And so I was able to parlay that exposure that I had to great demand generation into my next role at Clary, where I started at Clary to lead SDR and enablement. And then the head of demand left. And I was like, hey guys, I know what good looks like. I can keep the train on the tracks. Temporary became permanent. And then I owned demand gen and growth marketing. So I was able to stay close to revenue through pipeline creation, pipeline coverage forecasting, like those types of more demand oriented things. So I would highly recommend step number one for product marketers is develop a relationship with your head of demand. And sometimes they're going to be speaking a foreign language to you and you're not going to understand it. You just got to get bites at the apple. Just it's exposure to how they think, what they're responsible for, the decisions that they make, how they think about ROI, the different channels that they use. It's going to make you a more effective product marketer, I promise you. But it's also going to give you exposure to a different part of the business that is fundamentally closer to revenue. So that's pathway number one. Pathway number two is working with the product team. Too many product teams build stuff or prioritize stuff to build because it's cool. And they don't think as much about, can we actually make money on this? Is this sellable? What is the business case for this? And a product marketing person can be that sense check to do the addressable market modeling, to do the ROI modeling, to do all of that sell through type modeling. If we develop feature Y, how are we going to sell it to customers ABC to produce Z revenue? Like you can be the one who's codifying a little bit of the artistry that is product development and staying close to revenue by having that ownership over what is the forecasted revenue result of developing this feature, this capability, this platform enabler, whatever it is. Now, the best product teams already do this, of course. The best engineering teams already do this, but the best means top 10%. And so there's almost always room for a product marketing person to step in and think more deeply about how are we going to make money from this development? How is it going to change pricing and packaging? Now I need to go and communicate with our VP of sales and talk about how are these deals going to come together and what are we going to need to change in our CPQ? And there's all this downstream stuff that happens that product marketing people influence, but don't always directly impact. And if you can flip that script a little bit and go from influence to impact, you will start to stay closer to revenue, and that will therefore help you rise the ranks.
Really
Resurrect. Was that a pun that I just picked up?
No, I said rise the ranks.
Oh, I thought you said resurrect. I was like, that was slick what he just slid in there. Our skeleton branding and all. Nice.
All
right.
We'll do it in post production. We'll just say he said resurrect. We'll just put it in the caption right there.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll change the captions.
Just like a mini question on the end of all that. How much, when you were doing the positioning and messaging work specifically, were you using AI to like pull all of those synthesized thoughts together? And then obviously, what was the rest? Like when you were just like, no, I need my own human brain on this.
For this kind of exercise, AI was my thought partner and like synthesis partner, but that was the extent of it. I didn't rely on AI to create any of the assets that are defining our category, the pitch decks or anything like that. I feel like for thought leadership type stuff in particular, the thoughts are not going to come from some AI agent that's been trained on a large language model. It's just not going to happen. The thoughts, the thinking is going to come from human brains and human strategy. And so I would use our own product to take those interview transcripts that I did and just tease out commonalities and help me like do a little dot connecting between what our CTO said and what our founding engineer said and what our head of sales said, and just try and do a little bit of dot connection type stuff. But it wasn't a huge reliance on AI, honestly. It was me sitting and listening and focusing on what the people were saying, not multitasking and just checking a box to say, yeah, I talked to this person, but actually paying attention to what people were saying. And then I came into those conversations, honestly, with a bit of a hypothesis about what we needed to say. And I was using those conversations to validate or invalidate, frankly, human psychology, to validate my hypothesis and try and extend the thinking that I had already had. So very much a human exercise. Now, that said, now that we have our main point of view codified, now that we have our main pieces of thought leadership available, we use those documents to train up many of the AI workflows that we have. So now every single blog post we publish references those top line documents as reference material and uses the language selectively, but is not necessarily on the nose about this category language type thing. So as an example, guys, like the main problem that I'm not going to go down that road. You didn't ask me for our category story. Never mind. I was going to just give you the whole pitch. If you want to hear it, I'm happy to tell you, but I'm not going to do it.
I'm ready. I'm ready. You seem energized for this, so I'm okay with it.
Green light.
I got to clarify a question really quick though before you go into that pitch. And this is very relevant because that AI piece, going back to what you said earlier, you're uniquely positioned to answer this next question because you said, hey, I'm a 50% seller, 50% marketer. The closest avenue to revenue for product marketers today that they see is sales enablement. I'm going to create stuff to make selling easier. AI now enters the game. I can use AI to create more stuff to make selling easier. But then on the sales side, like you said earlier, that example is like, hey, what you guys are creating isn't working. Oh, great. We're going to create more of it.
More.
And you're laughing right now. So I'm curious, how should product marketers be using AI today to fix the sales enablement problem of creating more? It's not necessarily gonna make selling easier. Actually doing more is creating the unintended consequence of making selling harder.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Zach. And my answer is, if you're having zero impact, 0 times 100, 0 times 1,000, 0 times 10,000 is still 0. So more is not always the answer here. You got to change a different part of that equation, and you got to focus on the impact side of the equation. And so I don't know if I fully agree. In fact, I didn't mention it. So I know that I don't fully agree that sales enablement is the path to stay close to revenue. I often find that sales enablement is one of the more thankless jobs that exist across and the business, and ultimately becomes a service function more than a leadership function, which is unfortunate, but it's just the nature of the beast. So maybe a different thread to pull. What I would focus far more on if I were a product marketing person is get into those deals. And I don't just mean listen to the gong call where you're walking your dog and you just using it as a box checking exercise to be like, yeah, of course I listened to that call. No, go to the meeting live. Like, why not? Ask the prospect questions, meet with customers, talk to them, like actually talk to them, interview them, and you're going to understand a handful of things. Why did they buy? Why did they not buy? Win-loss analysis is extremely valuable. And with those insights, you can go and make the changes that are actually going to have an impact on the sales cycle. I'll give you a simple example. A year ago, we were making this transition, as I mentioned, from a freemium app to an enterprise platform. And we thought it was very cool for us to be able to say, we can solve any marketing use case you have. You can create workflows for literally anything you want. You can invent the future. We're empowering you. You're amazing. And we would have great first calls because people were like, this is exciting. And then it would be crickets because it was super intimidating. We weren't giving people a roadmap of where to start and where to go. So my insight from that, after talking to people, understanding them, talking to customers, seeing what their starting points were, was to package up a handful of use cases. And then we would still have those very exciting first calls, but we would say, we're going to be able to do all this stuff in the long term. We've architected a great value journey. We're happy to be partners with you on that value journey. We're going to scope it down. We're going to start here. We're going to start with this subset of workflows to build a foundation and to train you on how to use this technology. It's going to be great. Time to value is 2 weeks. You're going to love it. And basically with that little change from a platform to a productized use case type setup, we cut our deal cycle times in half and we tripled our ACVs. We told a smaller story, we sold less product, and we tripled our ACVs. And so that's the type of thing, if you think about impact, you think about sales velocity, that's the main thing that you can do. So from that insight, then we created all the pitch decks and the collateral and the customer stories, not around we can do anything for your marketing team, but around, hey, here's how you can use us for event execution. Boom. And here's a set of collateral sales team that you need to go sell this use case.
That's all I need to hear. I'm stepping out the kitchen. I'm like, you raised the temperature a little too hot in here, Kyle. So I'm gonna cool off a bit.
Man, and you were hiring for a product marketer recently, right?
Yeah, she just started last week.
So what was, and you don't have to go into details, but I'm curious on this is some really awesome level stuff, and I hope we obviously get a gajillion listeners so they can steal all this. How much of this is hey, I want to teach this to you versus, hey, I was expecting someone to come in and teach me some things right off the bat when you were looking for, obviously, your perfect candidate?
That's a really good question. So as I've alluded to, and I didn't tell my full career story for the benefit of your listeners, but I never had any traditional product marketing experience. I was never a product marketer. I was never a brand marketer. As discussed, I was raised up through SDR and the demand side, and I have something of a knack for content marketing, and that comes a little bit more naturally to me. Therefore, I have gaps on product marketing and what good product marketing looks like. So I don't have as many gaps on the demand side, and certainly not as many on the SDR side where I've spent the most time. And so God bless them. The people that on our team that are doing demand and doing SDR, I have more opinions on what good looks like there. On the product marketing side, the mechanics of great product marketing are somewhat foreign to me. How do we create the right interlock cadence between product and marketing? How do we create the right release and launch schedule? What is the lead time that we need for different tiers of launches? How do we think about partner marketing and the role of partner marketing in influencing the roadmap? How do we have an internal facing roadmap that we can share with our employees and our VCs versus an external roadmap that we share and sell against in the field? These things I don't have direct answers to. I have loose opinions on from what I've seen, but I don't have the frameworks, the bandwidth to do all of these things. So my role in product marketing is much higher level, I would say, around positioning, top line, category, evangelism, those types of things. And then the product marketing person that I was looking for in hiring plays a dual role. One is helping extend the thinking for all that category type stuff. And then number two, doing all of the more traditional product marketing work that I just cannot do a good job of because I don't know how to.
It almost sounds like product marketing isn't marketing.
Say more.
It just almost sounded like that as I was listening to your answer. But I think you're just, developing, hey, there's some skill gaps that I don't have. But, Zach, I know you've been kind of sitting on a question for a minute there. So we're going to let you speak because I feel bad at this point.
Like I said, guys, earlier, I had to step up for air. I'm like, look, the temperature was too hot in here like Sean Paul. So, Kyle, going back, I want to piggyback off of what Eric said here, because your point of view and what you just shared here was really clear. Hey, I know there were gaps in how I'm looking at the marketing function. Some problems that PMMs are seeing today is that when marketing orgs are hiring for marketing, product marketing, they tend to copy and paste the market. So we want someone that does this, does that, does this, and it becomes this culmination of different roles within the marketing org. And then it creates a harder expectation for the product marketer. It makes the hiring manager dissatisfied because they're, like you said earlier, I don't know what product marketing looks like. So from your perspective, if I'm a hiring manager listening to this conversation and I'm looking out for my product marketer. If I'm a candidate that's looking to better position myself as like that product marketer look for, I'm curious, walk us through what was your criteria on how you evaluated this is the product marketer I'm looking for, and like how much of that was like, hey, this is what our organization needs versus this is like the hard set requirements that I should expect from a product marketer.
Yeah, great question, Zach. I have a specific answer about how I approach things, and I have a more general answer about how candidates should think about things, and then a separate answer about how companies should think about things. You asked a lot of different questions there. Which thread would you like me to pull first?
Let's pull the company one because
Okay.
that's one we've gotten a lot about.
Okay. So number one, and I know I sound like something of a broken record here, but number one, you have to think about, you company leaders have to think about marketing as a leadership function inside of the company. If you think of it as a service function where all they do is fulfill the requests they're getting from the sales team, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so if you think about marketing as a leadership function, what does that mean? It means that the marketing team, often led or guided by the product marketing team, is directing controlling the direction of the company and controlling the way that the market thinks about what this company is, what they do. That's a very important thing. And most companies do not spend nearly enough time getting it right. Most companies, as we talked about before, are, especially startups, especially Silicon Valley startups, they're obsessed with their technology. And they think that because they have this really cool thing that people are just naturally going to want it. And so they don't invest nearly enough in the storytelling that surrounds it so that they can go and lead the market with some sort of real thought leadership. And so what I would highly recommend to companies that are thinking about a product marketing role is you have to be really honest with yourselves about how good and differentiated is our positioning. And a very easy exercise, and I did this, and this will maybe dovetail into my advice for candidates. I did this when I was interviewing for this role at copy.ai, is I took copy.ai's homepage and 3 quasi-competitor homepages, and I put it all up on the screen during my interview panel. And I was like, I covered up the logos. I was like, you tell me who's who. Who's who? And if you guys can't tell me who's who, how the hell are any prospects supposed to tell who is who? If all we do is talk about how generative AI is going to supercharge your marketing machine, like who gives a shit? We have to tell a much more impactful, again, C-level story. We have to create a problem and evangelize that problem. And that in many cases is what a great product marketing function or person can do. Now, hopefully you get that from whomever you have on the marketing team who's leading the team. But what I find many times, especially at startups, is that their first VP of marketing is a demand-oriented marketer who, and nothing to, I love demand gen as we talked about, but they're not always thinking, they're thinking more about direct response. They're thinking more about how do I get bang for my buck? How do I generate pipeline? They're not thinking, they don't have time or capacity to think as long-term as a product marketer needs to think about positioning the impact that's going to make eventually, or how you bring that to life with a content strategy and own the SEO for the different things that you're evangelizing. As a company, you need to think long-term. You need to be very honest with yourself about what the competitive landscape is and your role in it. And you need to understand that investing in a long-term strategy, which is, and you call it category if you want to, I think that maybe is a little bit misleading, but you really need to own the problem that you have and architect a different vision for the future that you're pulling your customers toward. And that's a lot of what product marketing can do. That is the A+ number one problem for somebody in marketing to solve. Sometimes a CEO will be heavily involved, and that's cool too. But that's a lot of what product marketing can do a very good job of, is that voice of market translated into your marketing positioning, messaging, category, definition, all the rest. So focus heavily on that. And then what I would the second recommendation I'd make to companies is, if that's the number one problem, you have to draw a line. Everything else is below the line. And there's probably some priority order for how that other stuff gets done, but leave that up to the person that you hire. They're going to go on the listening tour. They're going to understand things. And this is what we're doing with our new hire. Her name is Ryan. She and I have worked together in the past. She's amazing. Day 8 of her tenure here is she's coming to the leadership call and she is presenting, what does PMM do at Copy AI and what am I focused on? Number one thing, and then top 5 things, and then everything else in stack ranked in order. And it's that kind, and this is after she goes on the listening tour and she talks to all the sales reps, all the marketing team, all the product team, et cetera. And so she owns the function. And if there's disagreement, then we'll hash out that disagreement. We'll change number 3 to number 2, and it'll be a little bit fungible. But the product marketing person has to own it and control it, and then go and drive and deliver results.
I love that. Going straight into, the stakeholder uh, place and face and being, hey, this is what I do, this is what I don't, and this is the priorities. Do we agree on this? Let's get to work. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That the corollary answer there is about the candidate themselves. And I think you can take a lot of what I just said. Like during the candidate experience, the mistake that candidates make is they just answer questions that are asked. And you're like, wait, isn't that the purpose of an interview? People ask me questions, I answer them. No. Position yourself or be positioned. This is famous advice from Christopher Lochhead of Category Pirates. Position yourself or be positioned. Come to those interviews with your POV outlined in a deck, ready to present. Find an opportunity to control the conversation and tell them, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what good looks like. Here's what I'm going to do. Forget the first 90 days. Here's my first 30 days. Here's what's going to happen. And if you can control that conversation a little bit more, I promise you, number one, you're going to stand out. And number two, you're going to be aligned with the company that hires you. You don't want to take a job where there's misalignment between what you want to do and what the company wants you to do. So if you own that a little bit more and show people that you're stepping up to lead the function, then it's going to be a much more compelling interview.
How do you better assess out that an organization is the real deal? And what I mean by that is that I come in with my point of view of this is what I'm going to do. But then when you get hired on, it's like what you described earlier, is that it ends up becoming a service function where maybe the CEO is not ready to let go of that positioning aspect. Maybe they have that low level of trust of product marketing, of like how to lead that vision. And they're saying, this is what I want, go execute on it. But heaven forbid, if you execute on my vision as dictated and it doesn't go to plan, you're out the door.
Yeah, you're on the chopping block. Yeah, that's always there. There's no answer to that, Zach, because it's stakeholder management. Everybody's a little bit different. And the pressures that different people have, that the same people have at different times, change their perspective on things. And so you have to be aware of what is happening at the company level, especially when you're dealing with the CEO. You have to be aware of the pressures that she's facing, and you have to be responsive to those pressures. And at the same time, it's, as we were talking about before, it's stakeholder management to make sure that you are constantly communicating what you're working on and why, what the successes and failures have been on that stream of work that you've been pumping out into the universe, how you're iterating on, how you're extending thought leadership, how the campaigns that you're running are incorporating some of that top line. But you just have to be the internal evangelist for what you're doing and bring people along. If the moment you stop communicating is the moment where distrust starts to creep in. So control the conversation, have a regularly scheduled one-on-one with all of the stakeholders that you need to care about. I don't mean every week, but if you're a PMM and you have a monthly or maybe quarterly one-on-one with your CEO, own that agenda. Make sure you prep for that. Bring the things that you need to bring to that conversation. I see so many people, if they get either never having the one-on-one and they send the CEO the Slack message and then they just cross their fingers. They never responded to my Slack message. And you're like, yeah, guess what? CEOs don't respond to Slack messages. Wake up. So either they don't communicate effectively, or even if they have the one-on-one, they just show up to the meeting and they're like, I'll just respond to whatever the CEO asks me. What are you doing? Like, you have to be the one who's controlling the narrative here. So I know it's a little bit of a different way of operating and it can seem a little forward, but you have to be confident about what you're doing and why. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to inspire confidence in the rest of the company that's dependent on you.
I like that. And it reminds me of something that was said earlier in like a previous coaching class, is that confidence plus competence needs expertise. And that sounds like what you're saying here.
100%.
Perfect. I'm like,
yeah,
look.
No, and that rings true, man. Like if you can't inspire just a small room, how are you going to inspire the whole organization on any of your initiatives? And I think that's one thing that you can never just slack on. Like no matter how many times you drop something in Slack and remind people, hey, this is how things are going. Like you got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. So Kyle, I know we've had probably, I know it's only season 4, a few episodes in, but probably one of our best conversations. I won't speak for the other two. As we're wrapping up, I'm curious, you got any side projects you want people to know about? Where can our listeners keep in touch with you? Also, anything popping off at Copy.ai that you want to let everyone know about?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. I'm relatively active on LinkedIn. I post a few times a week on LinkedIn, so you can check me out there. I'm just Kyle Coleman. It's very hidden, I know, masked. Is a little bit of an alias there. So if you can find me on LinkedIn, please connect. I'd love to connect with you. Everything that I do, everything that I post about, everything that I evangelize is to accrue awareness, interest, and demand for copy AI, which is to say, I don't sell anything. If I'm going to develop a course, I'd give it away. If I'm going to do some thought leadership thing or some frameworky, I'd give it away. Like, the goal is to elevate the sales and marketing professions. The goal is to extend best practices. The goal is to make people better. My goal is to make people better at their jobs. And if that makes you more aware of copy AI and it increases our enterprise value, great. But I don't sell anything. So from a side hustle standpoint, you're not going to find me anywhere hawking my wares, selling Rolexes in Times Square or anything like that. The copy AI is on to some pretty phenomenal things. And as we've talked about before, there are use cases for basically every function across the go-to-market team. So if you're interested, I'll give you an example, actually, guys. We had a product launch coming in October of last year before we had our full-time product marketer on board. And I was like, shoot, I don't know how to do a product launch. And part of the set of deliverables that I ingeniously outlined was creating new product pages on our website, 9 new product pages to talk about all these new features and capabilities that we had. And so what I did was I interviewed our head of product, our CTO, and our head of solutions. I interviewed them each for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I asked them the stupidest questions you could ever ask them. Like, what is this? Why should people care? How does this work with the other part of our platform? Just interviewed them. And then I took those transcripts and I developed workflows to create the website copy. So if you go to Copy AI and there's a little drop down on platform, all of the pages that you see there are the result of me interviewing people and then asking the AI to be a product marketer and write the website copy for me. And so it's like things like that you can invent for any sort of use case that you have: event marketing, growth marketing, digital ads, content marketing, SEO, thought leadership, customer stories, everything in between. So if you're ever interested in learning more about what we can do for you, feel free to reach out and I'll hook you up with the right people.
All right, your DM's going to get flooded, that's for sure.
Good.
I know I'll be in it. Guys, you got any questions, last-minute questions you want to give Kyle before we head off for another sunset on We're Not Marketers?
I have one more question for you, and I feel like, Kyle, if I do not ask this question, there's going to be a lot of angry listeners on the line. Looking, as we said earlier, like for product marketers today that want to reach the CMO rank, like you've broken from SDR into that. What's that? You hinted at this, but I really want to get this more succinct. What's the one piece of advice that individuals, the solo marketers today, should be doing to continue to invest in their career growth?
Stop just doing your job. The people who think that their job is their only job are the people that don't rise the ranks. You need to understand that the impact that you can make inside of your company, no matter how big or small your company is, goes way beyond the bullet points in your job description. You need to understand that your company is faced with challenges that you are uniquely suited to figure out. And maybe you don't have experience having figured those things out, but you should have confidence that you can be the one who figures that stuff out. So if you have the mindset that your job is not your job, if you have the mindset that you need, or I should say, it's not just your job, you have to do your job, and you have the mindset that you can run toward the fire and put those fires out, that is how you start to build a reputation for yourself inside the company. And once that happens and you proactively go after stuff, now guess what happens? You're going to get visibility at the C level, and they're going to say, hey, we're working on this thing. We can't quite figure out how we're going to partner with PE companies to go and sell our product. I'll give that to Kyle and he'll go figure it out. And then you do. And that type of stuff accrues. And that's how you get promotions. That's how you get functions. That's how you get exposure to different things. And that's how you keep, I think anyway, it's how you keep things interesting. If all you do is the same thing over and over again, it gets repetitive, it gets dull. So you got to introduce that newness to your role. And if you do that while accomplishing things that matter to your company, that is the formula for getting a promotion. It's not just saying, I've been a PMM for 2 years, so now I can be a manager of PMM. No, you got to earn it.
Hey, that's all we need to hear. That was it for me. Kyle, this was an electric
Earth-shattering, I think.
No, game breaking.
Supercharged.
Supercharged. I was like, we had to keep the kitchen fan on because the steam was too hot up in here. You know what? We appreciate you for the time you shared with us today. From all of us, all our listeners, thank you. And with that, y'all, this was our most recent episode of We're Not Marketers, signing off. Thank you guys again, everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks, y'all.
Later.
Thank you for listening to We're Not Marketers. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, review our podcast, and share this episode with other PMMs. Thanks again, and see you soon.